Hello, and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the show where we talk about all things woo woo from the East Coast to the West Coast. There's a lot of trends happening in between, and we're here to share those with you, give you a peek behind the curtain on what it is to be a support system in the way of being a healer, a bruja, a magical individual, and we hope that you can take lessons and inspiring moments from the show itself. So we're with you almost every Thursday. And on this Thursday, if this is your first time joining us, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button so that you can see more of us, enjoy the show. Speaking of us, there go those introductions. I am Dahlia Rose over here on the East Coast, holding down the fort at Crystal Cognizance in my shop. I'm actually in my healing space right now. And over here, we serve our community through healing sessions, crystal sales, magical tools and products, and meditation and counseling services, spiritual counseling services to be specific. But I am not the only half of this whole show.
My name is Katrina Rasbold. I'm on the West Coast, and this is the last broadcast I will actually have inside of Crossroads Metaphysical Store. We close our doors on Sunday, and so moving forward, we'll be in my healing space at my home. Right now, this is my healing space here at Crossroads, and for the next few days at least, we still offer in-person services such as astrology charts, readings, spiritual cleansings, counseling, and spell work. We also have, for those few days, a storefront. All of that will be moving online to crossroadsoccult.com. Right now, we have had an online presence for many, many years. And so that's not actually changing. It just might get built up a little bit and hopefully get a new look if I can redo that website in the next week or so. So that's what I do here. This is a similar thing to what Dahlia does in the East Coast. I'm just on the West Coast. We have talked about many different directions and topics for today. What we like to do is to, as Dahlia was saying, chart the trends and what we're seeing. And that's not just in our shops, but also what are we reading online? What are we hearing from other people that is now a conversation piece? What comes up too often to be coincidence? And those are the things that we like to bring to you.
Absolutely. And so, along those lines, what we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at this week, there's an interesting trend I've been seeing and hearing from folks, experiencing a little bit of myself, is this trend of October sort of being a place of changing paths. We're not able to do business as usual. We have to choose a new way of doing things. So I've watched people being presented with the option of continuing as they always have and having this inner experience of I just don't feel like I can keep going in that direction. Or if they are able to continue going that direction, they have to almost reformat. They can't play small anymore. They have to,
Ooh.
get up out on the bigger stage, whatever that may be. There's no real declaration of what that is. Like even in the way of Katrina speaking about the in-person shop being closed. In a way, I can see that transitioning to a larger stage because then you have global presence instead of just out of California. So there are these odd and interesting trends. Oh, and I have to stop here because I want to say hello to Sylvia. Sylvia sent me a surprise package. She did another card purge, and I was like, "What is this box?" And I opened it, and it was with so many cards, and I was so grateful. So I wanted to
Oh,
say
that's
thank
so
you.
lucky.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you on the show live. Thank you, Sylvia. Um, in any case, uh, needing to make these shifts and changes that will equate to something larger for us when it may not appear as such like right in this moment. So that was one of the things I was seeing, and Katrina had some great insight on that as far as I think cusp,
Hmm.
relating back to cusp.
When we started having the idea that perhaps it was time to transition the shop online, we've done this for a very long time. And a lot of people think that because Crossroads the store just opened in 2019, that, we've only done this for 3.5 years or so, but actually we had a store in Roseville, which is north of us, for northeast, for many years. And then prior to that, we've been active in the pagan community, the Sacramento pagan community, since 1997. And so we've been very busy. We ran a coven for 20 years. We did public rituals that were huge. We've hosted festivals. And so we really reached a point that as older people, we had to decide what is and is not fitting into our life plan. What do we still have that we need to do that this doesn't accommodate? Now, as you well know, with Crossroads, we had a time where we have set opening hours, and your best retail time is on the weekend. And so we never, ever have weekends. We don't have people working in our shop. It's just myself and Eric here. We have apprentices that come in and work with us while they're learning to make their sprays and powders and salts and things like that. But we don't have a staff here in terms of working the register and running the shop, except for myself and Eric. And so that really got in the way of a lot of things we still want to do with our lives, like traveling. And I don't know, when was the last time somebody actually had a birthday party that wasn't on a weekend? We don't get to do anything that our other friends are doing. And we just really had that conversation of, when is the exit strategy? When does this happen that we stop? And so we did tailor it. It just happened that the time to stop seemed to be in October. And that was definitely a convenient thing for us. But at the same time, it didn't feel like a coincidence, because for CUSP, as you mentioned, we have a very specific pattern that we follow for manifesting and for releasing. And that follows the old agricultural cycle. So we plant in the spring, we harvest in the fall.
Right.
And we did start this store again, one of those coincidences, at the end of April.
Oh.
And our previous store had a similar pattern that it followed. So we do like to follow the cusp cycle whenever we can, but with the store, we planted it in the spring, and now our harvest is in tune with the ending, which is October. So that part did fall very much into play for us. Our harvest is being able to relax after another year of work. And that's really what harvest is about. You get your harvest in, and then for the winter, you're going to be in your home. You're going to be recovering from the hard work of harvest. You're going to be resting. And so that's what Eric and I intend to do in regard to the store closing. But we were led by a number of cues to close the storefront itself, not just the online stuff. But I think that most witches get to a place where they're observing the guidance they have from outside triggering, outside strayings that say, hey, this looks like it's a good time for this, and then we do a reading on it to confirm. Or this looks like a good time for this to happen. We check our progressed astrology chart to see if this is a good time for that to go on. We each have our tools that we use to help guide what's coming down for us. And that also helps keep us honest. It helps to allow us to have a backup. Not that we can't trust ourselves, but we're all human. Sometimes we're wondering, am I just being selfish? Is this a wise financial decision for me to do this? Should I? And sometimes we move on despite the idea that this doesn't feel like a smart move. And we find out later why that needed to happen. Absolutely. So it's not always about the money. It's not always about what we're feeling. It's about the convergence of all of those cues to show us the road that's opening up before us. That's what I really felt when you talked about October before, was looking at the road that's in front of us. And so often people make choices based on what was,
right,
rather than what is. And I cannot remember the psychological name for it, but there's a condition where you cling to something because you've invested a certain amount of energy or money into it. And so you'll say things like, well, I don't want to get rid of this item because I paid $1,000 for this, 15 years ago, and now it's only worth 200. So I don't want to get rid of it because I'm going to lose money.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there is a psychological, I wish I could remember the name for it, but that's not an accurate way of thinking, because it's a thing that's in your house potentially that isn't causing you a net asset.
Right.
You've already lost the $1,000 you spent on it. So gifting it to somebody else who's going to appreciate it isn't a loss, but we perceive it as loss. And it's
Right.
the same thing with businesses. People are like, oh my God, I've invested 15 years into this business and so much money. If I stop now, I'm not doing honor to the fact that I've worked so hard. Well, sure you are, because 15 years later, things are different than they were then.
Right. And you never know what transitions in you. I think you'd said it best, either last show or a show ago, um, that you can also start to notice a shift in the way that you deal with these things or you deal with people. And that's an important, that's definitely an important marker for moving through different circumstances of change. And oftentimes, what I see when folks come in is they'll talk about there being a block. And, sometimes those blocks are to say, hey, slow down and actually evaluate the situation. Are you holding on to this item? Are you holding on to this thing or this business for emotional reasons?
Mm-hmm.
Is there some validation you're seeking and continuing, to engage with that person or that situation or the job even, because of some level of usefulness,
Mm-hmm.
and not letting it evolve in the way that it needs to. And it really feels like October is trending in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
with this weird air of like the miraculous. Like as soon as you start to open up to the possibility of like, okay, you know what? Change is out of my hands. Let me just get in my, my little boat here and let the river carry me. There seems to be like an increase in synchronicities. The right people
I
notice your
agree.
stuff, the right people, either reach out to help you in some way. And so it almost seems like we're getting a weird, like a nod from the universe to say like, hey, you're going to be okay. And I don't know that I have noticed that in the last couple of years. I felt like the last couple of falls we had, it was like, okay, we're going into flu season. How bad is this going to get? And we're like, we've already been indoors, and
Mm-hmm.
am I going to make it through to the other side? And here we are. I feel like there is a lighter energy present to encourage us to change rather than the forced change that we've endured over the last couple of years.
Well, and we do that too. And when I talk about that idea of clinging to something because of what was,
Mm-hmm.
we deal with people who are doing that all the time. We see these people who say, I can't leave. I've been married to this person for 23 years, so I can't possibly leave. And when you challenge that, they get upset.
Yeah.
When you say, well, technically you could, and you're a different person than you were 23 years ago. You have different needs than you did 23 years ago. So do they. How happy have those 23 years been? There's that old joke, I've been happily married for 6 years. Unfortunately, I've been married for 12. You know, things change and needs change and people grow. And sometimes that relationship that was what you wanted 26 years ago or 23 years ago is not what you're needing today. So should you just keep clinging to it desperately because it was there at a time that it did serve a purpose? And you could change that out to say a job.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in this job for 22 years. And so I don't really, I've invested this long in it. Why would I do something else? Well, because you're not being respected for those 22 years because you're not making enough money to live on, because you're not fulfilled and happy with what you're getting in return, because it's no longer what you're called to do. And we can say, this mindset that I've had for 15 years, I'm going to hang on to it because I've had it for 15 years.
Mm.
And so it's really important that we do these occasional audits to really figure out what is and isn't working for us, and to be willing to release if that's what comes up, no matter how much time or energy you have invested. What's important is engaging now.
Right. And one of the things that stands out to me about that clinging space, because I'm sure it's just a fraction of what's going on, is the investment of identity. So, you went into more than, folks may have gone more into you just working the job, but to take on maybe the accolades that they received as, okay, well, this makes me a good human, not just a good um, whatever it was they were working in,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, even in changes I know I'm coming to make, I keep hearing people say, well, you're so good at that, and I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, like, I'm good at a lot of things, and there's a space of expansion when you allow that to evolve. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything is cyclical, and so it is so important to allow that growth, because it will be more. There's an assumption that it will be less, and it's just not, that's not your it's not accurate. Like Katrina was saying, you're I think you're only building into and building onto what already exists.
Well, and we've talked many times on this show about that zone of genius. And just because you're good at something, does that mean you are obligated to continue doing that? And
Yeah.
we have had that come up a lot with people when they hear that we're closing the store. It's, why in the world, why would you do that? Why would you take that from the community? What, you're so good at this. People need to be healed. They need to be to have a place to go to buy their magical items. And well, we're not taking that away. It's just going to be online now. No, but you should be here. Well, I don't want to. That obligation, that because you're good at something you absolutely must continue it, is that stymies me. I can't believe that people have that idea in their head that, okay, you're really good at playing the piano, so you should never stop playing the piano. What?
Until your fingers bleed.
Right, right. It's that demand of, okay, you're good at this, you must perform. Dance, little monkey, dance.
It's wild. And this is a great segue into the conversation of, you know where does the advice from others go? Like, where is too far as far
Mm,
as the advice of others? And we tend to turn to our elders, those who came to us, before we at the beginning of our journey, or we knew of them before we started our journey. And I think, in your case, maybe especially, there is this um well, if you close the shop, I don't have access to that
mm,
wisdom anymore. At least that's what's coming up for me as you were saying that. Like, well, if you go away, who am I going to turn to? And there is a long time, there has been a need to be fulfilled for a very long time, and that is self-empowerment. Like, you guys have
mm.
self-empowered so many, and it's almost like people are sort of like, I don't know, I built some stuff up, but I don't know if I can trust to stand on it.
You and I both are in situations where, I mean, when we're working with people, a lot of the people just need an audience. They need somebody to hear
Mm.
their story. A lot of people need validation that they're on the right path. They want confirmation sometimes for their bad actions, or endorsement of their bad decisions. And we aren't always the best ones to give them that. But people do have those needs and want those met in person, where they see that somebody is taking time out of their day to stop and listen and hold space for them. And yes, that's an important need. And you the idea with that is, well, I can throw this amount of money at you and you'll do that for me.
Hmm.
And when it reaches a place where, my peace of mind and my quiet and my stillness is worth more than the money that's being thrown my way, you tend to want to change that value system a little bit. And people have a really hard time with that, as you were saying. They feel abandoned and they feel upset. When I stopped having my coven that I ran for around 21 years, like I've mentioned on the show before, people were angry about that. I should just go on doing that forever, because people wanted that. And I need to have things in my life that I want. And sometimes another thing we see is people that their life has changed dramatically, but they're still clinging to the past. So, for
Yeah.
instance, I'm now married and have 4 children, but I'm going to live in the same little 2-bedroom apartment that I had. Ugh. But elders become an important part of what we're seeking. And we tend to invest that maternal or paternal energy toward the people that are elders. We often will call them Papa or Mama or uh, Mother so and so or Mama so and so, and as long as everybody's good with that, that's fine. But at the same time, we struggle, and I'm talking about paganism on my end. I'm
Mhm.
talking about the metaphysical community at large. We struggle, and also the United States. We struggle with what to do with our elders.
Mm.
We don't have a plan like a lot of cultures do for integrating our elders into the conversation and into the the how can I put it, the fabric of our life.
Well,
And part of the reason for that, I'll just throw this in real quickly, is because we didn't have that many elders until the 1950s and 60s.
and that's exactly where I was going. I mean, we almost as a nation did the reverse. In so many other countries, elders lived on and they carried on. And when people started coming to, and let me say this, indigenous tribes had elders as well. And
Mhm.
they went on to live lengthy lives, provided they were not at the hands of colonists. But outside of the US, minus the indigenous cultures, it was survival. So people were only living to, their 30s or 40s for a period of time. And now we have all this medical science to extend those life spans and have to come up with plans like, oh my gosh, if remember when they first started talking about the baby boomers, and if they live this
Mhm.
long, then social security is going to have all
Yep.
these issues. That like, no, you should have had plan, you should have had a plan.
Right.
And it boggles my mind. You're 100% right, there was no plan.
There was no plan.
Yeah.
I actually took gerontology classes as part of my lengthy college career. And I took them from the same professor. And she would get so flustered with me because when I took the classes, both of my parents were deceased.
Hmm.
So I didn't have to have the conversation that a lot of people in that class would have. And her big push, she was a huge elder advocate, which as an elder, yay, that's fantastic. But it was super aggressive. It was, what are you going to do about your mom and your dad? What plans do you have for them? How are you going to manage elder care? And it was just almost this screaming thing. And I was like, whoa. I mean, they saw it coming. Why do I have to have a plan? I have to have a plan for my elder care. I have to have a plan for the elder care of my spouse. Why do I have to plan for the elder care of my parents when my parents knew they were, if they were lucky, going to get old and pass away? And I could of course say that because my parents had not gotten old and passed away. They just passed away. So
Right.
I was kind of a position of safety on that. But it's always amazed me how completely blown people are about elder care. You know, Why did you not see that coming? That elder care is hard. I mean, I worked in an old person's home for a long time, and it's not pretty, and it's not easy, and it is not for the faint of heart. And people equate it to having a newborn, and they say,
Yeah.
when they took care of you when you were a baby, you should take care of them now. And I get that, and that makes perfect sense. However,
However,
when you are taking care of a newborn, it is with the promise of independence coming. It's with the promise of an investment in a future. With elder care, it's I'm going to be honest, it's not going anywhere good.
no.
And as much as you love that person and respect that person, I'm all about that. It's amazing. The drain that it is very different than how it is when you're taking care of a newborn.
Absolutely.
And I don't think enough care and respite and importance is given to those people who are uh, entrenched in elder care, because it's really tough. I would never want to do that to any of my 6 kids. And so, yeah, it is an issue. It's a terrible problem to have to manage, especially if that elder care is complicated by illnesses and or dementia or issues like that. But even the elders in our community who are in our pagan community or our magical community, we don't know what to do with them. And one of the reasons is that the idea of magical elders is also fairly new. Wicca just came into prominence in the 50s and 60s and really hit its stride in the 70s and 80s. And so the idea in the 1940s of having Wiccan or pagan elders did not exist.
Interesting.
So we are deciding what to do, because when we look at these various pagan and magical paths, there is evolution to those. And a path that doesn't grow is dead. So we want it to evolve. We want it to change and continue to move forward with respect given to the past. But at the same time, we also need to honor those who created it. And a lot of these paths, those who created it are still alive. I mean, think about Wayne Dyer. I would love to sit down and talk to Wayne Dyer for a couple of hours, and he's gone. That chance is missed. Louise Hay, I would love
Yeah.
to talk to her. I would love to talk to Raymond Buckland. All of these different people who were huge contributors. We can't have that conversation anymore. And when they were alive, we didn't quite know what to do with them. And on our message boards, and I say message boards like, hey, welcome to the 1990s here. But in message groups and social media, a lot of times the elders will come on and say something and get trounced. There are a lot of elders I know who were pioneers in the field who won't even touch TikTok because it's so vicious, because they are tired of getting shut down. So their voices are being silenced. And then you get the ones that overcompensate and get into the arguments and start trying to talk down the people who are younger than they are, the people who were not there to see what happened. And so they end up being, I don't want to say an annoyance, but people don't want to talk to them because they're afraid they're going to get lectured. So there's this weird thing in life where elders are concerned.
So I feel like in the communities that I've witnessed, elders are given like maybe a different different sets of power. So what I've witnessed is a veneration of certain individuals in a way that doesn't allow for their human side to be
Oh,
to
sure.
become aware of their human side, and then there seems to be like a clinging to that power that doesn't allow people to new people to come in and even maybe, I mean, I don't want to say like apprentice, but I believe that on our spiritual path in the metaphysical community, there's an evolutionary shift that happens. The first thing you see is a couple of the younger people trickle in with exceptional awareness, and they say, hey, something feels different. And it is what I've witnessed is that there may be a slight slip of power from the people who had it, and there is not a sense of, oh, now I need to, peacefully turn over power, but to, viciously hold on to it because they don't trust what will
Hmm.
continue beyond them.
Yeah.
Or there is no consideration for what they may evolve into, like the same thing that we were talking about in terms of change and what comes next. It seems like they're retiring before death, and it's like, well, no, you just have a different space to maybe teach from, that is just
Hmm.
whatever it looks like. It could be less hands-on. It could be, you only come down from the mountain 4 times a year to say something, and then you go back up. But there's not even space for more. And like
Hmm.
Katrina was saying, evolution is very important for all things, or else things die, things pass away. And I find that it's almost a codependent attitude about, well, this is my group, this is my circle, and it becomes like who knows who, and well,
Hmm.
certain people are not allowed to X, Y, and Z, and if you get enough people around, then they start sort of like denigrating the new way of things. And I think that's why, I guess I'm trying to give a little bit of empathy to the younger generation for the anger that they hold towards magical elders, is because they wanted the soft approach, and they were being given that, like, well, you're too young to understand, and well,
Hmm.
we're not at this place of conversation, and you should just be falling in line the way the people before you did. And that's not who's coming through energetically as human beings anymore.
It's really tough not to fall into that perspective of the star-bellied sneetch. Do you remember that?
No.
It was a Dr. Seuss thing where in the context of the story, you were really cool if you had this the star on your belly as a sneetch. And then it turned out that, oh, those sneetches with the stars, they're old fashioned. So the ones without the star bellies are the cool ones.
Mm,
And so it just really does roll in these, the mindsets are incredible. It's a fine line. It really is. Because on one hand, you've got the elders that rightfully so want to be respected, not necessarily
absolutely.
revered, but just not denigrated when they
Yeah.
have worked so hard to allow these people to have this perspective or to have circles. I mean, a lot of us were working at times when it wasn't unusual for the cops to roll up on you just because you were having a ritual in your backyard and your neighbors didn't like it and called you in.
Mm,
So there's lots of ways that were paved in that way. And it gets a little bit weird sometimes when you've done this for 30 years, you've been invited to be on an elder panel, and some guy is wanting to get on the elder panel when you know for a fact that he just started practicing 5 or 6 years ago. And you're
oh,
like,
for
bitch,
sure.
you just got here. Okay, why don't you sit down and just put in your time like we all did and listen and learn? But the arrogance and the ego starts to come through.
Oh, sure.
And the other side of it is that the arrogance and ego of being an elder is really tough because you know what you did, you know what you bring to the table, and all you want is for that to be respected. And so in that effort, like you were saying and like I was saying too, people just often will overstep and not be listening, not have uh, a conversation. They're having a lecture instead of a conversation.
Right, right. There needs to be a distillation of, like, this all or nothing attitude. If a ceremony is being had, we respect the traditions, but in the middle of the ceremony isn't the time to be like, we need to just throw this out and do something completely new. That should be discussed,
Mhm.
before, after, and in a way that points to, because that's another thing that I've noticed. So, I'm noticing a lot, is this sort of like well, we just need to try something new without any sort of context. Okay, well, why are you doing this new thing? Well, it's just
Mhm.
different than before. Okay, but what does it allow you to do? How does it add to your ritual or make something more tangible for you? And there's a lot flying around that I think is just out of rebellion
Mhm.
for the sake of rebellion. And I think that there needs to be like a circle moment where we're all just like, hey, okay, like Katrina was saying, maybe we're not. This was a couple shows back. She was like, I'm not into animal sacrifices. So there's a come to each other moment where you say, okay, we're gonna not do that, but we do need to give something. And these are the things that feel right. And yeah, like Sylvia said, doing things out of boredom.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's just it doesn't add. I think that's the conversation, is let's not do the all or nothing thing, but also let's figure out what adds, rather
Mhm.
than just create some unique circumstance that appeals to the ego that wants to be special in
Yeah.
that moment.
Well, and when you're talking about interrupting ritual, for instance, and I know that there's not a lot of young people who would do that, younger people who would do that, where they would just say, okay, stop, we're not doing this anymore, let's do something different. We also get the side of the elder who says, stop, you didn't light that candle correctly, you didn't call in that quarter
Oof.
correctly. So there is that middle ground that has to be the conversation that continues to allow the evolution of that path. Now, in our case, we did invent something that was somewhat new and different, because Eric and I were both coming from a position of Wicca, which we both love, which we both still revere, but was not feeding our need for positive manifestation. At its
Mm,
heart, Wicca is about celebration of nature, celebration of cycles, celebration of the god and goddess, and of our seasons. And we love that. That made us very happy. The celebration of the phases of the moon, fantastic, beautiful. But we needed something that was going to create positive life change every single year. We wanted that spiral that's building and coming back to the same place on a higher level each time. And that was where cusps came from, was us saying, this isn't working for us, as opposed to boredom, as opposed to disrespect. It was, look, we need something different than what this is. So we are going to go off to the side and we're going to build this. We didn't try to turn somebody else's circle or somebody else's ritual or path into that. We
right.
stepped aside and said, we're going to give this a shot. We feel like this is getting channeled down to us. We can't write as fast as this is coming to us. So we want to be able to put it into action. And that in 1997 is where CUSP came from. But we still took a lot of crap from elders. I mean, that was when we were in our space of being the young upstarts who were doing something different. And I had absolute hate mail come to me of,
Mm,
what are you doing? You can't walk backwards in a circle. All kinds of terrible things are going to happen. You can't go in and just decide to change this, this, and this. And we were saying, well, honestly, actually, we can, and we are, and we're not doing this as an affront to you. We're doing this to practice our spirituality, and we're inviting people that are interested in that to check it out and see what they think. And yeah, it was tough. It was tough to hear all these people that we respected saying, oh my gosh, if you teach this to newbies, it's going to be like giving a baby a gun. Like,
well,
well, actually, no, it's nothing like that. And these were people that had never been to one of our rituals, that had just heard what we were doing.
yeah.
So,
But the heart of that was that you filled a need. And one thing else that stands out to me as far as filling the need is when you approach that, like, I need something there, you may find that it's not a whole new ritual, but that it is a simple release within your own self. And I think that one of the things that I appreciate about what you were saying was that you filled your own need.
mhm.
And then there were others that had something similar. And so they came to join you, as opposed to this sort of like, conversion of others, as you were mentioning. Um, and then, like I said, adding in that piece of like, okay, wait a minute, is my need personal? Is it one time? Is it, you know, is there something missing for me just in this season? And I need to create change around that. And so because I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I guess this is a question. Did you guys find yourselves, going through the rituals a couple times before you decided, like, okay, yes, this feels like it's appropriate for, this season, this path that we're creating, et cetera, et cetera?
We were just winging it. Originally, Cusp was called. Now, it is Climbing Up the Spiral Pathway is the current name of CUSP. And that's because the evolution of CUSP brought about this idea of the spiral that's taking us around the cycles of the year, but at a higher level each time. But originally, it was called the Circle of United Solitary Practitioners, because what we had done was bring together people who were solitary practitioners who wanted to just dip their feet into group practice and see what that felt like. But it could be anybody. So we had a druid, we had Wiccan people, we had an agnostic person, even. We had all of these different paths that came in that said, I'm really feeling the draw to some kind of spirituality, but I can't really put a name to it. Or
Mm.
I'm established in my spirituality and I want to do something different. And like Nicole was mentioning, what we do is give a scaffolding that says, look, you can do this if you're Jewish. You can do this if you're Christian. You can do this if you're pagan. You can do this if you're Druid, Catholic, whatever. You can still follow these 8 Sabbats and the energy of it and just use your own divine figures and your own spiritual heart to make this happen. So for us, we were just, it wasn't necessarily at first that we created this year. I think it took us a year to do that. And then after we did it, we saw that it all came together in this cycle of manifestation. What we were doing at first was, well, we need to have a Beltane ritual. What do you know about Beltane? And started compiling information about Beltane. And well, historically this happened, and this was the time of this, and this was the time of this. And so we just took it Sabbath by Sabbath around the wheel of
Mm-hmm.
assembling that information. And once we did, that pattern of growth became very clear for how it could translate out to spiritual growth. And that was kind of how it came about. But that, I could lie and say, oh yes, we intended that all along. We were just throwing shit to the wall to see what stuck. We were saying, we don't know what to do. God and Goddess, just tell us what needs to happen next. And so it really was going through a year of it and then looking back on what we had done and saying, wow, I think we've got something here that's important. And that was how that grew. So I wish I could say it was intentional, but it really wasn't. It was just totally channeled.
Happenstance. But you know what? So what I was trying to understand of what you guys were doing was that year piece that you mentioned. So another thing that I'm seeing a couple folks do is that they'll make these grand statements around work that they believe is it is valid in some way, and it is for them. That's important. But they will sort of make declarations that it is valid for everyone before
Mm.
it is battle tested. And that leads to, I guess, questions of like, okay, but what is this spirituality thing? So what you are mentioning about cusp is what I teach on the Sacred Pathfinder, is like you find your sacred, like how you honor the sacred and the divine in yourself and how you intend to carry forward. But this is not going to look the same as the, two or three people down from you. And so, but don't just, be willy-nilly about it. Be very intentional. How do you connect? Are you connecting through the tangible? Are you connecting through the feeling senses and all of that? And so I think it's so important to also put in the time and effort to make sure that not only does it work for you more than one time or over several situations, but as you share it with the world, it's a share, it's a gift
Hmm.
But this sort of, okay, well, we need to be doing this and we need to be doing that. Like, that is not, it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but both like elders and young people kind of fall in that category of doing that nowadays. And these extremes are not sustainable.
You're absolutely right about that. And you're right about everybody wanting their way to be the right way or the
Right.
way it should be done. We see that across every religious path in the history of ever, which is very frustrating. And one of the big lessons for me is in 2013, I wrote a book called Magical Ethics and Protection. And I have rewritten that book around 15 times. I mean, just because magical ethics is like nailing jello to the wall. I mean, it's just so um and I teach a class on magical ethics too, and that also is under constant revision because magical ethics isn't the same for one person as it is for another.
Right.
And the basic magical ethics that I can come across that all paths seem to agree on is just don't be an asshole. And so much of your magical ethics that you're working on in hoodoo or in Wicca or in Druidism or in New Age work or whatever you happen to be doing just comes back to just don't be a jerk about it. Don't be offensive. And don't get in the middle of other people's business. Mind your own business. And so the things that our mamas should have taught us when we were growing up, those basic kindergarten rules, everything I need to know, I learned in kindergarten, all of that still comes back to magical practice. Keep your hands to yourself.
Yeah.
Keep your magic to yourself unless you are invited. And play nice and share the sandbox and all of those things are just so simple. And people just get obsessed with what you were saying. They're so insecure that they have to believe their way is the only way. So they've
Right.
got to jump into that comment and start out that comment on social media with, well, actually, and then you're like, oh, here it comes. There it is. And there is no well, actually. There's only perspective.
And we are taking this not from like, science is valid, and also if you are certified in something, also valid.
Yeah,
But this
you.
is, we are talking about a such a sacred connection that is now being pummeled by rules and what I would say is disorganization, not organization, in a way that almost makes you not want to do it. I mean, I can't tell you how many people come in here and they're just like, well, I am this, but there's a lot of rules and I forgot to put my water out. And, and I'm like, okay, well, did your house burn down, or, did something crazy happen? And the answer is no, because those things shore up some people and not everybody. They're not meant to be preventative. They're meant to be, to re-anchor that connection that you have at the end
And
of
you
the day.
know what? If you're repeatedly not doing what a ritual or a deity demands of you, you need to rethink your shit like right now. So if you know that Ocean always wants a bowl of water put out, but you keep forgetting to put out the water, you need to back the fuck off of Ocean, okay? You need to be in a path where it's, I don't want to say easy for you to follow, but where it feels natural, where you
It's
feel
harmonious.
compelled,
Yeah.
harmonious, yes, with who you are and what you are. Don't try to push it to somebody else. I always think of magical practice and spiritual practice like sex. Everybody gets a different response. And for somebody to go on the internet and be saying things like, to achieve the best orgasm, you must wear 4-inch heels. You're going to have to do that, and you're not going to have a good orgasm. It's like, amateur, I'm not wearing no 4-inch heels. Okay. That's not what appeals to me. So everybody has to find where their best magical orgasm is going to occur and what they're willing to do to get that. And
Right.
I ain't putting on 4-inch heels. Okay.
It feels very one-sided, I mean,
Yeah.
there's only I feel like only half the party enjoys the 4-inch heels, but I don't know. I
But
don't
when
know.
we
Leave
think
your
about it,
comments.
yeah, when you think about it in those terms, it's ludicrous to presume that somebody else's kink is going to be the same as yours.
Oh yeah. There's so
And
many
it's,
flavors
yeah.
of pink.
And it's the same thing for magic. It's the same thing for spirituality. Everybody's going to have what gets them off spiritually. And you got no business showing up in their altar room.
Oh, Sylvia, you'll have to tell us. There's a funny scene about that in the Ozark. I
I
don't think
love Ozark. That's one of my favorite shows. I'm so sorry it's gone.
I, but you're 100% right, more than 100% right. There's so many different flavors of everything, and when we have an opportunity to bring those together, which I think is the piece that's missing, and the reason why we are being pushed to do something different, to not just accept what has always been in the month of October, or maybe beyond that, because again, we're looking at trends. This may not be something that resonates with you, anything that we've talked about or said about October. You know what? This is the show where that's okay. And with that, start asking yourself, well, if it's not that, what is going on for me this month, or what could be going on, and let us know, because we'd love to hear from you, as far as that's concerned. But there are so many things happening that cannot be the same anyway, and we can only evolve together. I know Katrina's had this experience, but having a store where anybody can walk in, having rituals that support people that want to evolve and grow, you learn so much. It's such a gift to be a facilitator and have somebody show you their passion and their experience, and go, wow, I would not have considered that as a possibility until I met you. And to be forever changed by that is so important. And I think at the end of the day, this is what October's energy is about. Show us what you can do so that we can all know, who and what we are in proximity to that, not to say good, better, or best of that. Um,
Ruth Langmore is a character in Ozark, by the way.
oh, okay. So we have the Ozark explanation. Can you explain that, Katrina? Because I don't know the show.
I honestly, well, Ozark's one of my favorite shows. Marty Bird is Justin Bateman, who's amazing, and Ruth Langmore is Julia Garner, who's also a wonderful, wonderful actress. But they're making jokes about Marty and his left brain approach to everything. It's a really unique scene, and yeah, it's
Okay. All
yeah.
right. Maybe okay, so I'm gonna bring it, maybe is this a millennial thing? I'm gonna take it to Sheldon and Big Bang Theory.
There you go.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I really think that when it comes to it, just like we're all responsible for our own orgasms, we are also responsible for our own spirituality and making that into what it's going to be. And when we talk about October, particularly, one of the most important things to remember is October is the end of the harvest season. October is when we're putting things to rest at the end. I remember when I was growing up, the end of October was when you would look out and you would see all the plant beds burning in the night. And that meant that we're done harvesting and we're burning off the plant bed for the year, so that the fields can be fallow, and then we will replant in the spring. And so it was very much a time of celebration. Everybody was getting paid. For us, our harvest was tobacco. And so a lot of us kids would go out into the fields, and that was our time that we got to work. And I say got to work because we were paid very well, because nobody wanted to do that job. But we were the ones that went out, bringing in the tobacco and hanging it and letting it dry, and so that it could go off, and then everybody got paid. And so it was a really exciting time for us. And seeing those plant beds burn, it was symbolic. It was saying the year's work has ended. Mm-hmm. And so that's not just my energy. Historically, Samhain, October 31st, Halloween is a time of endings. It's a time associated with death because the veil is very thin. It's a time of transition. And so we transition from the time of work into the time of rest. And we can't do that in modern society usually, but still our spirits crave that. And so October tends to be the time of, look, let's hurry and get this done. Let's we've been kind of cruising. We got to finalize this because we're going to burn that plant bed.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love the symbology and the transformation of fire. I mean, that to me screams like, okay, well, you're going to try to pull that plant out of the ground. It's going to be ash. So you might as well take a different approach.
Well, and the idea was in European countries that anything that was left in the garden or left in the fields on November 1st was poison.
Oh,
Now,
interesting.
nothing changed between October 31st and November 1st. But if you had produce or any type of plant still in the fields on November 1st, it was considered a loss. It was a waste. And so you scurried and hurried to get all of your crops in by November 1st when All Souls Day came along. And that was when you could delineate that time of year. And it's also a psychological message to us. Don't crave the entire process of the year. The whole year, don't just be in gimme, gimme, gimme mode and work, work, work mode. That there needs to be a time of fallow where you yourself are rejuvenating.
Absolutely. 110%. It boggles my mind, the power of the collective, like that thought, how long it went on. And you could probably find, history. I'm going off on a tangent. You could probably find historical evidence of people getting sick, still trying to eat what was there November 1st, and how much of that was psychosomatic, how much was it, real. And it was real for the people that did it. So and it looks like somebody caught your accent there for a moment.
Oh, that's because Rob's an old Kentucky boy.
Oh, goodness. All the gifts today. It's always a gift to share with you. And for this to be, the last show in Crossroads.
In Crossroads. We're having a lot of laughs this week, of course. We had our last karaoke. We had our last Santa Muerte party. We had just we'll have our last which is at the Crossroads hour tonight. So there's lots of laughs going on. Eric's struggling with it more than I am because for what we're experiencing, I will be doing a very similar thing as we transition to being in the house. He, however, was the face of Crossroads in the retail store, so his part is finishing. Yeah. So there's a lot of identity and labels wrapped up in that for him. So he's having a little bit harder of a transition than I am. And so, yeah, it's quite an interesting time. But as Nicole said, what a harvest. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's having the field burning, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I'm burning his field down.
Okay.
Oops. Sorry, honey.
But he will grow from the ashes.
He'll be all right.
Grand Phoenix. All right, guys. It is
Nicole. He might need a session, sweetheart.
Oh,
it's always Rob knows he's got a free license with me.
Very cool.
He's one of my boys.
It's been an honor. I know, you've gone through a lot of transitions on this show. This is yet another one, and I am so grateful to you for your vulnerability. I mean, you are not one of those elders that I don't think I could be where I am mentally, emotionally, or spiritually without you. So and for you to do what you do and say the things that you say on the show, I think we're all benefiting. So I just want to say we're grateful to have you. You're not allowed to go anywhere.
I ain't going anywhere. If anything, I'll be able to be around more. So that's good. Definitely increasing social media, because that's what you got to do when you don't have a store.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we had one last comment here. Today's hustle. Oh,
little AJ. Yeah.
One last thought from AJ. Today's hustle culture is so at odds with the rhythms of magic, and that often adds to more bumps in the road. And yeah, couldn't have said it better. Blessings to you too, Sylvia. Thank you all for the show today, and we'll catch you next time on Crossroads of Cognizance. Night, everyone.